everybody to today's webinar brought to you by CFI Corporate Finance Institute. We are going to be discussing how to create high-performance finance teams, the roadmap to do so. I'm super excited to get started. I'm Anna Tallarico, your host and moderator today, and we're going to get started with our roundtable discussion here in just a minute. But while everybody settles in, I'd like to share a little bit about CFI and why we are so passionate about workforce development and closing the skill gap for financial professionals. So my colleague Patrick Gation is here, and I know I bungled that again, Patrick, but Patrick's here to tell us a little bit more about CFI for Teams, and then the panel is going to start immediately thereafter in about 5 minutes. So welcome, Patrick. Thanks for kicking us off today.
Thank you, Anna, and it's my pleasure to take a few minutes here to introduce the audience to CFI, which was founded back in 2016, for finance professionals, by finance professionals, and since then has already helped over 1 million plus students in over 170,000 countries, quickly launching us to be global leaders in online financial training, which is just fantastic. Here's a small snapshot of the footprint that we've made in the world so far, and some of the large organizations who now rely on us to support their financial professionals in their learning and development journey as well. Our clients, you can see, range from a range of industries such as banking, technology, to finance, to telecommunications. We pretty much cover the gamut there. CFI provides industry learning, hands-on, relevant skill and training for all finance professionals at any career stage, from beginner right up to expert. And we're 100% online, so you can complete your courses pretty much on your own time. A subscription will provide access to our 4 prestigious certifications, over 100 courses, making up for over 500 hours of practical, skills-based video learning. Over 300 templates as well, tools to master your craft in, and instant access to our regular stream of new learning content, ensuring that you'll be a step ahead of the latest trending topics in financial services. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Ebbinghaus, but CFI's mission is to help anyone become a world-class financial professional. And the best way to get there is having the right tools at your fingertips to help you produce your best work. Now, Hermann Ebbinghaus was a psychologist in the late 1800s, and he founded the concept of the learning curve or the forgetting curve. Now, you're going to think the 1800s, but multiple studies since then have also showed that the average learner loses approximately 50% of new concepts learned without the ability to apply the new concepts immediately within 30 minutes of the lesson. So these studies also show that after 30 days, 80% of the new concepts are lost, which is 80% of your investment gone, just like that, through no fault of anyone. So CFI was built to allow your learners to have the resources 24/7, 365, to rely and reinforce these new concepts as much as they need, or go back to them time and time again, and really get these new concepts drilled into their DNA. And I'm sure that throughout the session today, you'll hear from our panel, and then also our guest speaker at the end with a demo of the platform, and where we'll talk about some of these concepts in more general terms. Anna, back to you.
Thank you so much, Patrick. I appreciate you kicking us off today and talking about something we're so passionate about at CFI. You mentioned the phrase hands-on training, which is really what it's all about, is learning hands-on. A phrase I use a lot is learn by doing, which is how so many of us learn, and just getting our hands onto things and practical kind of real world experience. And really that's the core of what we are all about here at CFI, and something we're all passionate about. So we're going to get started. I'm super excited to bring on a few of my colleagues, and so that I don't mess up anybody's bio, this will be the only time today that I read to you, but I'm going to introduce everybody and tell you a little bit about their background, and then we're going to kick off with our panel discussion. And I should say, if you have questions as we're talking today, please feel free to use the chat area and we'll get to as many questions as we can. But I'm going to welcome up Tim and Andrew and Kyle today. So Tim, Five Pond, our CEO, has been an active participant in the capital markets for almost 20 years. And he has a wide range of experience from investment banking, investment management, corporate development, significant transaction experience as well, both at global banks and public and private companies, working on mergers and acquisitions, divestitures, and capital raising. His passion about learning and teaching and modern professional skill development led him to found CFI in 2016. And so if you think about the fact that we were just founded 5 years ago and how quickly we have built a learner base across the globe, it's really fascinating. You can see today, everybody we have here from around the world, it's so exciting to bring students together who are all passionate about developing their skills. Also with us is Kyle. I know I'm going to mess this one up. Peter D. Kyle began his career as a professional educator and a coach in 2008. His transition to financial services in 2014. He, in 2014, joined RBC as a loan officer on several commercial banking portfolios where he served as a mentor to support the training and onboarding of the new hires throughout that time. He joined CFI in 2020 as a subject matter expert, developing and delivering curriculum for the CBCA. Many of you probably know it, our Commercial Banking and Credit Analyst program. Kyle loves teaching and designing innovative educational experiences. He's passionate about serving students and learners around the world. And he's a favorite for us to have talking to our customers. We're always happy when Kyle can share his perspective and his experience. And last but not least, I was excited to introduce you to Andrew Liu. Andrew is VP of Capital Markets at CFI. Prior to joining CFI, Andrew spent over 20 years in financial services with considerable experience working in the capital markets in Asia, with a long-standing focus working with the largest fixed income investors at leading global investment banks. And we are really proud of our instructors here and excited to share some of their perspective about skill development and creating high-performing teams. So I'm hoping that we can get everybody up here on stage to join me and we can go ahead and jump right in. And again, audience, as they're joining, as we're talking today, please feel free to ask any questions you have in the chat and we'll definitely try to get to as many as we can. Look at my very handsome colleagues in their suit and ties. They're certainly outshining me today. It's so good to see you guys. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Anna. Yeah,
Thanks,
we're
Anna.
excited to talk about this. Obviously, very passionate about it.
You're so excited. Sorry about that. Here I am. So let's jump in because we've got a lot to talk about. And I'm just excited to pick your brains and continue to learn from you three. And this one I think about a lot. You know, my background is in online training. I'm very passionate about learn by doing and hands-on skill development. But as an industry, finance has historically relied on in-person training for new hires. It's sort of what happens, right? You come into a role in a company, you go through a couple weeks of in-person training probably, and then you're out in the field, you're out working. So how do you guys think about online training and skill development? Is it a supplement? Is it something that replaces that type of training? And Tim, not to put you on the hot seat, but I'm going to throw that question to you first.
Sure, sounds good. Thanks, Anna. Happy to kick it off. I think this is a great question, and I've attended a few of these new hire training programs myself at a couple of different banks that I worked for. And there's really two components to these new hire programs. One is the technical skill development and the training that you're getting in the classroom there. But then the other piece is bringing everybody together who's just been hired into one location and helping them get to know each other, network, and build up on the social side of things. So I think it's important to differentiate between those two use cases for these training programs. So when it comes to the technical skill side, online education can clearly, I think, deliver a superior or more effective product, something that you have more control over in terms of the speed at which you take it, whether you need prerequisites, whether you want to skip ahead. It's really at the spot that you need it to be. Whereas in the classroom, sometimes you're either totally left behind because this is so new to you, or you're so experienced that it's boring for you and you've just checked out. So I think for the technical stuff, it's very superior. Now, I don't think it's a replacement for networking or the social side, of course. So I think there's a way to combine those with online learning, though, where you do your online learning in advance and then bring everybody together and get them to maybe debrief some of the learning and have some networking and social events. So I think that is the way of the future for new hire training program.
That's, you've touched on something I think a lot of new employees into the workforce are struggling with right now, which is they're working from home, right? So they're not getting the camaraderie of their first team that they're working with professionally as they maybe exit school, and they're just not getting that sort of the social aspect, which is also important to a cohort of young professionals or professionals entering. But do you think, I'm just kind of curious, obviously with people working from home, not getting that, we saw a shift, obviously with the pandemic from in-person training to just having to do online training. I'm just kind of curious, where do you see that going? Do you see that sort of sticking? And do you think there'll be like a blend of in-person and online? And Kyle, I'm wondering what your thoughts are there.
Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously, the pandemic's turned a lot of things on its head. It seems likely that we'll probably continue seeing a shift towards like a much more blended approach. You may even see some organizations go overweight online learning. Something that's really striking is just how many firms we've seen have had to move to a hybrid office and work from home arrangement. And in fact, many are going remote first policy altogether. So it's pretty tough for like a business to credibly put their hand up and say, we're embracing flexible remote first work, but we don't have a flexible remote first learning and development solution. Like, it almost seems silly to say out loud. And particularly given that online learning, when it's done correctly, is every bit as effective as traditional classroom training is.
Mm. And why do you think that as an industry, in particular, we're one that is just so, sort of tied to our in-person training? I'm just kind of curious, you three have been through it. And I'm just kind of curious, why do you think we've kind of like are resisting in some cases that move to online, even in the face of, a time when everybody has to work from home? I don't know. Andrew, what do you think?
Absolutely. It's a great question. I think a lot of my experience in the capital markets is that you have a basic level of understanding, but afterwards, a lot of the tricks of the trade, if you will, are actually taught in person. And that's where the real value is, I believe, when we have these traditional in-person learning. However, having said that, as a new person, a new joiner to the organization, I think the online training component gets everyone up to a standard baseline, if you will, just to make sure that everyone understands the basics and the technical side of that knowledge. So you don't waste the time of your more experienced staff to actually teach them the basics.
And I'm curious, not to throw you a question that we weren't, thinking we were going to come up, but I'm curious, as the three of you have been through that type of training before, and then you sort of left the training incubator to go in and do the role, where do you see, like, I imagine that these, you're gapped still, right? Like, you can't learn everything in a week or two and retain it and everything. And like, how do professionals that leave the training and then go in sort of close those skill gaps that they might have?
Yeah, good question. I think to some extent they sort of fumble around and have, trial and error, ask coworkers or colleagues to help them, to show them through it. And so there's also a lot of learning over the shoulder, I'll call it, of your peers. But what's interesting about the courses that we've developed is they are shoulder to look over. We're teaching by demonstration. So we're not just throwing some stuff at you on a screen like in a lecture hall. We're showing you step by step in Excel how to build a formula, how to calculate a ratio, how to make a report, and so on, in a level of detail that you can't practically do in a classroom, that you need to have your own screen that you can pause and zoom in and get a close look over the shoulder. So I think that this is online learning solution for that over the shoulder, on the job training that people are used to doing.
And more missing, right, when we're all working from home too. I think that's so right. So I feel that we take a pretty fair and balanced approach to training, in that I think we respect what happens when we're all together in a room learning, but also have a deep belief that a true way to develop professionally and develop skills is through learn by doing, hands-on, on your own pace. So before we wrap up this question, I'm just kind of curious, around the room, what do you see some of the pros and cons of in-person training versus online training? Because I do think, it's important to acknowledge, like Tim kicked off with us, there's something about the social aspect of in-person training that can be important, but I'm just kind of curious what other kind of pros and cons you guys see.
I can jump in if you want. One of the big pros that seems to be cited a lot for supporting in-person training is the ability for people to collaborate in small groups. You're able to generate discussions and get different perspectives, and you can leverage people's different experience and expertise. I've always found in training that's not exactly how it shakes out. That's kind of how it's designed, but it's fairly common to see participants that are more sort of introverted take a bit of a passive approach to the group interaction. And then on the flip side, you'll always have a few sort of A-type personalities that tend to dominate most of the dialogue. The biggest con that I always recall from in-person training, though, was how participants are required to really be present. And I don't just mean literally physically in the classroom, but like mentally focused and present in order to engage in the learning. And that's tough for professionals. So I do recall instances where I was in a classroom training scenario and my phone could be blowing up at any given time with like client issues. So it's impossible to get the most out of the training when you're thinking about other things. And maybe worse still is that can be fairly disruptive to other participants. You've got people kind of getting up and stepping out. Like, you can't ask your clients and other stakeholders to just not have any urgent issues because you're going to be on training for a couple of days. Like, that's not in line with people's lived reality, and can be sort of unfair for participants to expect them to take a lot out of a training when they're focusing on quite a number of things, not just what's going on in the classroom.
Yeah, it's such a good point, right, as professionals. And then also, you mentioned introverts. Everybody learns differently, interacts differently, and I think that's, we have to provide training that allows for different styles of learning even. Andrew, what are your thoughts on sort of pros and cons?
Well, I certainly think that there are benefits to having in-person, and I think both Tim and Kyle have mentioned those. The networking aspect is definitely important, and some of the soft skills potentially that you could pick up as well. But having said that, I think gone are the days where financial institutions or even companies spend 2 or 3 weeks training with in-house trainers their new joiners, just because simply there aren't as much resources available for that. So my view is that we want to have our students show up for work on the first day being competent. And I think, what Tim touched on earlier in terms of the over-the-shoulder learning aspect is what we do try to incorporate within our education, our training, is some of the tricks of the trade, so that when they do show up, it's not as though they have this deer in the headlights situation and they're completely overwhelmed.
What a great question. You mentioned soft skills, and we have a great question coming in, which would be, what do you think the most important soft skills are in career development for finance professionals?
Okay, I can jump in, and then you guys can add on it. I think of soft skills for finance professionals in 2 categories. One is client-facing or outward soft skills, and the other is like internal with your team and people management soft skills of your team. So depending on where you sit in finance, if you are client-facing, then you're talking about sales skills, negotiation skills, reading a client, understanding, and building a relationship with the client. If it's internal to the team, then it's the ability to manage up, to be a good communicator across your team, to collaborate, to delegate, and all that. So, there's a lot more we could unpack there, but quickly speaking, those are the two categories of soft skills that I see.
Helpful. So we've spent a lot of time on this one, so I'm going to jump ahead because I know we've got a lot more to get to. This one is a personal favorite of mine, just as thinking between, the difference between training and learning, right? And so how do companies shift from a culture of and an indoctrinated culture in our industry of like this one-time training to ongoing skill development, the difference between training and a learning culture? What have you seen work well, not work well? I'm just kind of curious. Andrew, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, most certainly. I mean, I was very blessed to have started my career at an organization that had a very strong learning focus. And it was considered one of the preeminent investment banks that actually did stress having to have this education standard across the board for all employees. And that's something I carried through with myself throughout my career, is that in order to have this training and learning culture, I think it's key that the managers actually embrace that as well. So for example, at my last role leading a team across a region, we actually had an annual review process where we did this 9-box with HR to look at which of the employees had the potential and performance to excel, and then we'd actually look at bespoke learning journeys for each of them.
That's so important, and that's really hard to do in person, is a bespoke learning journey. And I think of training as like once, and then learning is something we're always doing, and it sort of gets indoctrinated into our culture. And Kyle, you were an educator before you were a finance professional. This goes back so far for you, and I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are, and I'll go click deeper with you, which is, what are the characteristics of a learning culture, right? How do people foster that if they don't know how, or they're just getting started?
Yeah, great question. So I think curiosity is really the hallmark of a learning culture. It's a big shift for a lot of organizations. Like, just saying we want to have a culture of learning is not something that's very easy to do. Generally, culture changes are most effective when the shifts are like sort of organic. Now, having said that, though, there are things that organizations can do from the top down to sort of steer people in the right direction, like good tangible strategies. And Andrew touched on some of them, but one might be something like a reimbursement budget. So X dollars per year for professional development. And to your question about what makes a true learning culture, like, consider giving people the opportunity to learn professional development skills that are outside of their current role, right? So maybe we can help position them for something they want to do 2, 3, 5 years out, as opposed to what do you need to be successful today, tomorrow, and next week. And to Andrew's point, implementing KPIs for employees around professional development, like a minimum requirement, and creative ways to look at other things that they're interested in so they can round out their skills, and just foster that sort of culture of creativity and ongoing learning.
Yeah. And having KPIs around it, you're right, that's a great way to measure it and reinforce that it's important to the culture. And Tim, what are your thoughts on, I know this is a topic for you that you think about a lot, right? Training versus learning.
Yeah, okay, just quickly on it, since I think there's been a lot of good points already. I think they're both very important, and they're both, of course, different things. So training, to make an analogy, I view training as sort of like jump starting your car. When you need to get going, you need a block of learning intensified. That's your training up front, and there's a place for that. That's jump starting your car. Learning is more like the oil changes and the maintenance that you have to do on your car over time so that it keeps running smoothly. So I think that they both matter, and they have slightly different purposes and use cases.
That's the analogy of the day. I love that. I will use that all the time now. I love that. And I think too, thinking about indoctrinating into the culture is finding unique and creative ways to do that. I remember talking to a learning and development executive a few years ago, and they were talking about what a challenge it is to get everybody to take a couple days off and go, deep dive into material. And I was saying, what if you tried a quarter of 15 minutes every other day, right? Or letting somebody say, I'm going to do 15 minutes or I'm going to do 30 minutes, but like getting creative and not being so prescriptive with when and how people do it, I think is important. And saying it's okay to stop for 15 minutes and do a little brush up or spend 30 minutes on something and then come out of it. And just sort of thinking about different ways we can do this, and like expecting a professional, to your point, Kyle, can kind of go off undistracted for 8 hours. So I think that's important too when we think about shifting to the learning culture.
Can I add one thing, Anna, actually?
Please,
Another tangible solution. Consider 15 minutes here and there is very good, but even something like 2 hours every other Thursday. And for managers to encourage that, and there's a little bit of flexibility. That's not the same as saying 1, 2, 3 days in a row that you have to be at this training. It's like, remind them gently that throughout the entire quarter, you're going to be doing this for a couple hours or half a day every 2 or 3 weeks, and create habit, right? If you can create that as a habit, that goes a long way towards developing a culture where it just becomes part of what people do and how they do it.
Yeah, totally. So this idea of bespoke training, Andrew, you couldn't have set it up better for this question, which is, thinking about as leaders and as organizations that are responsible for teams of people, how do we assess the skills on the teams, like, right? How do we develop those skills? And so I would love to hear a little bit more. I'd love to hear your thoughts and a little bit more about, how that bespoke sort of tailored approach to learning and skill development worked in your previous role.
Yes, absolutely. I'm actually going to start with that second part of the question, and how important is this learning and culture within an organization? I'd say it's paramount. I think we have, as anyone involved in the markets or even in any field of finance will know, things change very quickly. There could be new developments, new products. The markets are always constantly moving. And in order to stay ahead and to make sure that your staff and your teams are able to keep up, I think it's paramount that we have a learning culture embedded within finance organizations. As for me personally, I did mention that I did do these annual reviews on all my staff. But the second part of that was then to look at the courses they needed to complete. And I actually put those within their annual objectives to make sure that it was clearly documented. But more importantly than that, there are things that managers can do as well. When you look at your staff and you realize there's certain gaps in there, don't think that it's up to the employee themselves to do it. That's where you can bring in people from learning and development. Perhaps it's a team-wide thing. Perhaps it's something that the organization as a whole hasn't been focusing enough on. I think as a leader, you need to identify these gaps to help your team become the best performing team that they can be.
Yeah. And I think staff is hungry for that, right? Everybody wants professional development. It's something we think of as it's like a top down, but I think our job is to reinforce it and provide the structure. But I think for the most part, people are so hungry for ongoing development. Anything else on this one, Tim or Kyle?
Sure, I would just add that in terms of assessing skills of the team and then developing a plan to build those skills, there's a few things that we actually offer at CFI that are super helpful towards that. So one is skills assessments, where you can and so if you are a CFI for Teams customer, you actually have an admin dashboard where you can assign things to people on your team. So you could assign to people a skills assessment for them to take, and the skills assessment will give them a score and rank them on something like Excel or accounting or finance. But another way you could do it is you could assign courses to people and gauge how they interact with those courses, meaning if they find the course too easy or too hard, that's another way of deciding what additional coursework to assign them. And the courses have quizzes and test questions in them, so you'll really know at the end of the course, did I understand this, or do I need more here, or is this too easy? And you can assign more learning from there.
Yeah. I may add as well, it's one thing for a manager, and it can be very effective to say you need to complete course A, B, and C. But this is more of a leadership thing than a finance thing. It's harder but very powerful for a leader to engage in really good dialogue and ask hard questions of their employees to help. Like, if you can help your staff arrive at the conclusion themselves, so they say, actually, I think I need training and support in A, B, and C, that alone is going to ensure much, much greater buy-in from employees as they sort of embark on this learning culture and professional development journey, particularly if they understand and believe that they need it. So it's sort of a joint conclusion as opposed to just an assignment necessarily.
I love it. Yeah, that's very Yoda-like of you, and so true, though, right? Everybody has to be bought in. We don't want it to be top down. And I think assessments are even something, right, that people are a helpful tool personally, not just for those of us who are, designing training programs or curriculum for our staff, but taking an assessment as an individual and seeing where the potential strengths and gaps might be is super powerful. And I think assessments have been a big topic in learning and development for many years, but certainly over the last couple of years with the distributed workforce, where we can't be in person always we can see a work product, but we can't always see sort of the day-to-day. I think assessments can be so valuable. Well, gentlemen, we only have a couple more minutes with you, and I know your time is valuable. So this is like the nuts and bolts of now we have people sitting all over the globe, right? As organizations have sent their workers home, we have different skills and levels and experience. We have new cohorts of people joining. We have people that have been with companies, 10 years, different time zones, lots of different roles. Like, how do organizations support this and do it at scale, but also do it, in a bespoke way that it's meaningful for each individual too? Like, what are some things you've seen work well? Tim, you're going to go first on this one.
Sure. Okay. Thanks, Anna. Happy to jump in. So two things come to mind for this. The first is learning paths, and the second is self-paced education. So with CFI for Teams, we have the ability to create custom learning paths where you can pick and choose courses from the library of 115 courses, 5,000 lessons. You can piece that together for different departments or different teams or different skill levels in your company. So that can all be totally customized and tailored to them. And then all of the learning is self-paced. So when it comes to time zones or affordability or things like that, the self-paced learning solves all that. So it's really the key ingredient is like the learning path and then the self-paced capability.
And to even go a little further than that, I think because we're working in different time zones, the old traditional way of being able to call on help from colleagues or your manager or anyone else within the organization, that may not exist. But the fact that we have all this knowledge and it's easily accessible online and in small bite-sized pieces, I think that's the way that a lot of these organizations are going to have to operate, in this new post-pandemic world.
I think that's right. And Kyle, I'm curious, like as an educator, somebody so passionate about that, how you probably saw it even in person with different people with different, sort of, you talked about it, different levels or styles of learning or introvert and extrovert. Like, how do we support that when, we're not all together?
Yeah, so something that I remember from pedagogy courses, nothing from business school. This is going way back, and it works with youth athletes, it works with adult learners, and just about anyone. There's a relatively simple formula to help people achieve growth or development, and it's challenge plus success equals growth or development. So if you're trying to help your team develop skills, the key is it has to be challenging, but not so challenging that they can't achieve success. Because you see this particularly with adult learners. They just say, well, I don't need this anyways. This is dumb. You don't want to frustrate people. And so if you're someone that's designing custom learning paths or trying to curate curriculum for someone, you need to be able to challenge them, but they need to be able to have that aha moment and be successful in order to develop. The inverse, of course, is if it's too easy and they don't feel challenged, you lose growth in the same capacity. So, I would put forth for anyone that's a learning development manager to make sure that they keep that in the back of their mind. Things have to be, if you're creating bespoke curriculum, you have to challenge people, but ensure that they can achieve success And that's impossible to do actually in a classroom setting with the one size fits all teaching to the median of the room. It really does lend itself very effectively to tailored self-paced learning.
Yeah. So true. Fantastic. Well, I have one more quick question before you guys go. We have a ton of learning and development professionals here and executives, but we also have a lot of students with us. So how can an individual help create awareness for online training and development and support this culture? Maybe if they're inside of an organization that doesn't have that yet, or they're thinking about it. So I'd love to just share a little bit with our students today that are also here. Tim, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, happy to share some thoughts. I think the best way for it to infiltrate an organization is through performance management and objective and goal setting. And that could be initially at, say, the individual level for you yourself, let's say, as an individual contributor, talking to your manager about some learning objectives for yourself, picking courses, putting them in your, whether you do annual or quarterly goal setting, putting them in as your goals, achieving them and showing that you're better at what you do. That would be sort of phase one. And phase two then would be to help spread that around the company so that the company, broadly speaking, incorporates skill development and learning and development goals in everybody's performance objectives and the whole performance management system.
And I think it's so, to be proactive about your development as a professional is so important, right? To do that as sort of starting autonomously. Kyle, any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, what's more organic than going to your manager and saying, I'm interested in this, like I want to learn it, and I think it's going to help round out my skill set. It's going to set me up for success in the future. If enough people are doing that, it's going to sort of force an organization's hand. If they're not already thinking about ways to create more of a learning culture, it's going to eventually force them to do so. So just putting up your hand and saying that I'm interested, encouraging them to perhaps consider reimbursing you for learning and development initiatives and things like that. Just speak up.
Yeah, advocate for yourself, right? And what about you, Andrew? Any other thoughts on this one?
Yes, I'm going to approach this from a slightly different angle, and that is right now, as you know, we're in this global competition for talent across all organizations. And I think an organization that doesn't have an awareness of training and support learning and development will have a hard time attracting and retaining some of these staff. So that would be another argument that I would make in terms of how an organization should really take this very, very seriously.
Yeah, that's a great point too, right? I couldn't agree. We have to develop our own workforce, but also we have to be adding value to our workforce of the things that they want. So it's got both angles there. Really quickly, before I let you guys go, somebody asked the biggest pros and cons of outsourcing L&D versus developing it in-house. And I thought that's an interesting question. Anybody want to jump on that one really quickly?
I assume that, just to clarify though, if we're talking about outsourcing of L&D versus in-house, I assume that's talking about like course sort of content, training content, if you will.
I think so.
If it's training content.
Yeah, that's what
I think, the quick advantages to doing it in-house are simply that it's exactly the things that you want to teach. But I think that's a relatively small advantage compared to the major disadvantages, which are that it's extremely hard to do and probably a lot bigger undertaking than most people would realize. At CFI, we've got a team of 65 full-time people. And on top of that, we have 20 contractor developers. So when you think of that team of 85 people, working around the clock to create this learning, to make sure that it's up to date, super high quality, that the technology is amazing, that's clearly a massive investment. So I think it would be easy to maybe underestimate what's involved and then build something that's not great. So I think really, outsourcing it is really the way to go. Obviously I'm biased, but.
Listen, you guys, I could spend all day with you talking about this stuff. So I'm really grateful for you to come and share your perspective today. So thank you very much. And we'll see you soon on the next webinar. But while you guys exit. And again, thank you so much for joining us. It was really enlightening for me. But while you guys are exiting, I'm going to bring up my colleague Paula Moon. I hope everybody will stay for a few minutes. Paula's going to take us through CFI for Teams.
Thanks, Anna.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Hi, Anna. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming, Paula. I'm so excited for you to share a little bit about CFI Teams because we've been talking about it, for the last 40 minutes. So I'm glad to share it with people.
Absolutely. I'm really excited to be here. I can talk about this stuff all day long, but I'll try to keep it short for you all. I'm going to share a tour of the online platform that CFI has developed specifically for finance professionals and their teams. And I want to show you two angles. I want to show you the student experience, and then I'm going to take you into the back end, which is really powerful for managers and administrators to gain those keen laser vision insights to progress, success metrics, those types of things. So to kick things off, I'm going to share my screen. And you should be able to see my platform. Welcome back, Colin, it will say. Okay, perfect. So as your student pops into the platform for the very first time, this is the landing page that they're going to see. And this is an oasis of learning. So what CFI has done is we have taken our massive collection of courses and we have curated them into clean-cut learning paths based on competency. So as you can see, we have commercial real estate finance specialization, our flagship program, financial modeling and valuation, commercial banking. Really, it's a one-stop shop for training professionals. And this is the default setting. But as Tim and Kyle and you and Andrew had mentioned, it is really important for organizations to be able to address specific business objectives and unique organizational requirements, right? So you can take our courses and you can actually handpick which course, and you can assign it on the individual level, and you can also assign it on the group level and various groups. So it's a really easy way to avoid reinventing the wheel. Our experts have created these paths for you and built these courses for you. Now, the platform itself, I've been in the e-learning space for a really long time. It's designed to be really user-friendly, and it is. The finance professional is at the core of every single thing that we do. And it has everything that you'd really want from a learning platform. There's the premium templates and skills assessments that Tim was talking about. There's also this really powerful search functionality. So it's one thing for an organization to be able to assign specific training to fill critical skill gaps, to create awesome learning programs as they're onboarding new students and employees, but you also want to develop that learning culture and to be able to empower employees throughout their day. And so we have a really amazing search functionality that will gain access for the employee to everything that we have to offer. So we have articles and we have courses and we have lessons, we have you name it. And so if something lands on their desk, they haven't had to touch it for 6 months and they have no idea what to do, they can do a quick search in our system and it will bring them to a wealth of resources that are designed and created by true finance experts. Okay, so that's really, really powerful. Sometimes we're flailing, Googling, what have you, and this is a really reliable resource. It will also help your employees keep up with the latest trends and techniques and tips. We live in an ever-evolving world. So how are you supposed to keep up? This is a really powerful tool in order for your employees to do that. Another cool thing is that just like YouTube, Netflix, what have you, it's very intuitive, it's very user-friendly. You're able to just hop back in using this ribbon to the last course that you were in. You don't have to think about it. We make things really simple. You'll be able to see your completions, how many courses you've completed, how many lessons, just to give you an overview of your performance and progress. But the meat and potatoes of the program is, of course, in these learning programs. And again, it can be customized and tailored to your organization. This can be slimmed down so you only see one learning path. But as an example, I'm going to take you into our flagship financial modeling and valuation analysis program to show you how it's designed. Again, as you go into the learning path, there is a beautiful search functionality, so it makes it really easy. If you just need something on the fly, we have you covered. You can drill in using filters by subject, by your competency level. You can also, it's really great for keeping organized, and that there's, you can see what you have in progress, what you've completed, what you haven't started, those types of things. And each learning path is designed to be taken in progression and based on your skill. So we start right from the fundamentals. You have your accounting fundamentals, reading financial statements, an Excel crash course, and what have you. And then it gradually and quickly progresses into more and more advanced subjects that CFI has identified is required to be considered a world-class financial analyst. That is our ultimate goal in life here at CFI, is we want everybody to become a world-class financial analyst and have the skills to do so. Now, one of the hot topics that comes up with my clients is mergers and acquisitions. So to show you how these courses look, I'm going to open this up, this particular course here. And just give this a moment to open. So in each course, there is a full assessment. So you go through the course. In order to complete it, you have to achieve an 80%. The good news is that it's self-paced. So you can do these courses as many times as you need to. You can go over these lessons as many times as you need to. You do not need to worry about holding up a classroom or anything like that. You can really take your time and get these concepts drilled into your DNA, so you're truly gaining that practical knowledge to be successful in your role, right? Each course is exactly built the exact same way so that you have a very seamless experience. As you can see, here's Tim teaching. Like, you get to learn from the CEO of CFI. He teaches the concepts. He's been in the field. He understands what's required to be a successful financial analyst, and he's teaching you what he's learned in that curriculum that he's digitized, right? So it's really, really powerful that way. At the same time, we understand that online doesn't always cut it. So we do provide you with a plethora of hard copies that you can save to your desktop, you can print off if you need to. And so you're going to download an actual M&A model. You're going to work along on this M&A model with Tim. And then you're going to have a blank model that you're going to download, and you're going to do one from scratch all by yourself with the knowledge that you've acquired through the course. So it's really, really cool, and it gets you that hands-on experience, that, real world experience in fake environments, so you're not affecting real organizations. And so that's really a high-level overview of the program itself. Again, too, they're built to be really engaging. So you're not just going to be, watching a 2-hour lecture. We're going to keep you engaged by check-ins to make sure that you're actually understanding these concepts and ready to move forward throughout the course. Now, I do want to just take a moment as well. I promised that I would have a look at the administrative functionality. And this is really important, not only to CFI, but it's important to the organizations we work with as well, because it's one thing to assign training, but it's also really important to be able to measure success and to be able to support internal conversations that you may have. So as you are an administrator, you have the ability to assign courses, to build learning programs. If you're a manager and you're having a one-on-one coaching session with someone that's saying, I really need help with my M&A models, you can assign them that course, and that will accelerate the learning curve. It will quickly fill that skill gap, and it will empower you as a manager. On the back end, you're going to have a really nice overview as the administrator on how your organization is doing. You're going to get laser vision into the active students, inactive students, how many have completed, how many courses are completed, what is going on really. You can drill in by the year. So for example, we have multiple groups within this organization, right? FP&A, they're at a 67.3% overall for 2001. If we drill in on 2002, it was 36.7. Obviously, they have a long way to go, but they're trending in the right direction. So that's awesome, right? It's showing that your courses that you're assigning are actually providing return on your investment. And that's what we also want at the end of the day. You're going to be able to see your top students within your groups. You're going to be able to see, break it out per manager, per group. And then if you really wanted to drill in on specific groups, you can get even more granular. You can get as granular as an individual. So you can search for groups. You can search for specific students as well. And just to kind of give you a peek at what this looks like, and by the way, you can export all of this into CSV files, so you can send them internally and support yourselves that way. But you're also able to just see, like in this particular group, they have 7 of their 12 members certified. Amazing. There's one person that failed. What's going on? So we can scroll down and we can have a look. There's obviously a very critical skill gap that's there. So that is an alert that they need more attention, right? So you're setting them up for success. You can see Kale King, he is rocking it. That is amazing. And so you can send him a message as well if you wanted to. So that is a really high level overview of the beautiful platform that we offer here to empower finance teams and get them the practical training that they need. I hope that this was on the mark with what you're hoping to see.
This was awesome. What a great walkthrough. Love to see the platform. We had a great time together here today. We covered a lot. It was great to hear about CFI's background. It's great to see the platform, and it's great to talk about learning and development and skill development and training. So Paula, thank you for taking us through it. I really appreciate it. And thanks everybody to our attendees today. We're so grateful that you joined us. We hope that it was insightful, and we will see you at the next CFI webinar.